Alright you guys, for today's video we are going to be making some drawstring, what I call treat bags, but you can use them for whatever you want I guess. And they have these little windows in them and they're all done in the hoop except for the casing around the top needs to be sewn. It is done in 2 hoopings, you have to do them separately. And so we have a 6x10 is the kind of medium. We have a 5x7 and this one here is a 8x10 as well. There is a 9x14. I just don't have that here. All right, so you can see that we have the lining of the bag. The lining becomes the drawstring casing portion, you see. And my kids ate all my candy for the display. So this one here, you can see, and this one definitely will hold a lot. So this is the 6x10, and this one here is the one we're doing today. This one here, I actually love the size of this one a lot. This is the 8x10. All right, let's just put it sideways. And in this one, you can actually fit a mug, which, wouldn't that be terrific? You could give somebody this, a mug with some hot chocolate. It also will fit, I don't have it here, but my son tried it and it fits 2 of his Stella Artois beer in there. So you've got that. And there you have it. Nice little gift, hostess gift, whatever. All right, so we are going to get started on this one right here. So please stay with me and I hope you enjoy the tutorial. Thanks. All right, so to get started with this project, what we need are just a few simple things for this bag. You need some sort of vinyl material for the window, and you need 2 pieces. So for all of these, you need one for the outside and one for the lining. So you need 2 pieces of that, and I use somewhere between a 12 and 20 mil gauge. It really depends on how thick you want it. All right, so we need that. And then we need 2 pieces of medium weight iron-on fusible. So you can hear, this is the fusible side, and we'll be putting the fusible side up. So one side is nice and just flat and cottony, and the other one has a glue. So we need that. And then you need the outside material and the lining. And for this bag, it is 1 long piece of material, and on pretty much all the things I make, I do put a SF101 fusible interfacing on the cotton just to help stiffen it up a little bit. And so that is on my outside material. And you'll see that the one for the lining is 1 long piece as well, but it doesn't have the fusible. I didn't feel I needed it for this one on it. And you will notice that the lining fabric is longer. That's on purpose, to be able to make the drawstring casing at the top of the bag. So that is why we have that. So you do have to make sure that the lining is longer. And to help keep the casing closed on the bag before sewing, I just use a basic little steam seam kind of thing. It's just a little tape. And you will need some sort of cording to use as a drawstring. You can use cord, you can use cotton rope, you can use ribbon if you prefer. And then I use one of these little gadgets just to pull the cording through. Just goes on one end, right? And then that closes and then you can pull it through. So you need that. And we are ready to begin. So the first things first is we're going to take it back to the machine and run the placement stitch on the stabilizer. And for the stabilizer, I'm actually using a lightweight kind of tearaway stabilizer. I recommend a tearaway instead of a cutaway for this. All right, so to the machine and placement stitch. All right, the placement stitch is done for this. So the part that is wider up here, this is the top of the bag, and the part that is closer to the placement stitch, this is the bottom of the bag, and obviously this is the window area. So now we need our piece of medium weight fusible, and you take it with the fusible side facing up. All right, so you put the good side on the stabilizer. I use a little bit of the 505. And as you can see, I avoid the middle part to make it easier to cut out. And you just cover that. And then we take it back to the machine, and it's going to run the tack down stitch for that. All right, so here we are back, and we have run the tack down stitch, and as you can see, it's 2 circles. All right, so what we need to do is we need to cut off the excess. Don't cut too close to the circle because you need to make sure that this material stays. So you cut the outside and then you cut the inside circle, but leave the stabilizer. So I have cut around that, and the circle is about as perfect as I am, which it would be not exactly. However, and then you need to just cut a slit or just make a hole so that it's easier to tear this center portion after putting the fabric on. All right, so the next thing we have to do is take the hoop and we turn it to the back. So you turn it over, and a little harder to see on the back here, but we do have that original placement line at the top, okay? So what we need to do is we need to take our material, and this bag is really not the best for a directional material because the front side will be facing up and the back side will be, well, you know, upside down. All right, so where we have the outline here for the placement stitch, the rectangle, at the top of the rectangle, we want to put the material just above it. Not too much above it, but you know, you need a little bit to cut. So I usually put about 1/4 inch above it. So you take your material, the one that you want facing on the front, where the hole will be, and you take that and you turn it upside down on the back of the hoop, and you take it and you go just over. So make sure all your placement stitches are covered, all right? And just up there, okay? And then we will tape this one into place. And now we take it back to the machine. We'll flip it over. And we are going to run the tack down hole to hold the material. All right, so we went and we did that. I did it in a different color just to show you guys, although I wouldn't normally do that. So it's the inner circle. So the next thing that we have to do is we need to take out this little piece of stabilizer in here. So gently tear it so that you don't rip off any of the other stuff. And then we need to make a circle inside the fabric. So it doesn't have to be too small, but it also doesn't have to be too big. So now that we have that done, as you can see, it's another perfect circle like me. And what we need to do is you need to make little flaps, little notch cutouts inside this. So what I do is I just use my scissors and I carefully go along and I just cut it into little notches that are going to allow the material to turn, okay? And do not cut the stitching, be so careful. So let's see if you can kind of see what I have done. It's better on the back, I think. All right, so you can see that I have just notched to that center hole all the way around. Okay, so the next thing that we have to do is we need to take the lining piece, or we need to take the outer bag piece and put it through to the front of the hoop. So you take one of the corners and then you just stuff it inside the hole, and you just do that with all the remaining corners. All right, so now that that is done, you can turn the hoop over and just gently pull things through. You don't want to stretch that. All right, you see it just pops through just like that. You can see your circle, and you can see how your little flaps here help it. Just grab that better. You can see how the little flaps help it lie better and flat. And you can see how this material is going to help hold those down, and a little bit of this because the fusible side is up. So when it's turned this way, you need to make sure that your top edge is above, okay, for the outside of the bag. So the next thing is we just need to take this and iron out the creases a little bit. Just don't stretch it or you'll stretch your circle. All right, so I just let it cool off a bit. And the next thing that we have to do is just tape this down in place here. Okay, now what you need is one of your pieces of vinyl, and we need to take this, turn it to the back, and we need to cover this portion. So if you make this vinyl piece too big and then you forget to cut it, it's going to be in your seams. Don't do that. I've done it. So what we need to do is, I just like it to be about the same size as the biggest circle we have here, and then just tape that into place. And now is the time to take it back to the machine. And for the outside bag, we are going to run the finished stitches for the triple bean stitch that's going to hold the window in place. Okay, so I have gone around and I did those triple bean stitches, so you can see the vinyl is holding on in there. And although I'm showing you this in this order, you could actually just do the folded part of the bottom and then come back, and if you have this the right size that won't stitch in here, then you could do this then. However, because it's out, I am going to cut around the excess vinyl, and I'm going to make it about the same size as the big circle. And the reason for that is when the two bags, the inside and the outside, the lining and the outside, they're put together, the vinyl here that's on the outside will help hold the two of them together. They like to stick to each other. So I've got that cut down there. And the next thing that we need to do is we are going to be running these two long stitches down the side. Those are important. Don't skip them because you need them for the folding process. And also, after you've done those, would be the time to run yourself any other design or name or whatever you're doing. So we're going to run those two on the side. All right, so I went and we have those two lines going down the side. I did them in white so you can see them. However, I would normally do these in the same color as the bag. Yeah. All right, so the next thing that we have to do is, this is the top of the bag up here, obviously, because anyway, it's the larger part. So down here, where all the excess material is, what we need to do, I'm just going to make sure my tape is not in the way, and what we need to do to make the bottom of the bag is you need to take the material at the bottom and fold it up over top, and we're on the top of the hoop. And as you do that, you can see the bottom portion of the placement stitching. So what you need to do is and that same stitching is where this ends, so don't pull it too tight. So what you want to do is you just want to flatten this out, line it up with the bottom here, and just finger press it into place. Okay, so now you have this nice edge down here. that is lined up with that, and we will take it back to the machine, and we are going to run 2 diagonals on here to help hold this in place for the box bottom. So let's go do that. All right, so as you can see, let me just show you. I know it's a little hard to see now that it's white on this part, but you can see the 2 in the corner here. So we've got this one and this one. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to take the front piece up here and fold it back. Now, I am showing you this as a step-by-step process, but I normally would not take my hoop out of the machine. I would just do it on the hoop. All right, so be careful. So where these are, diagonal pieces are at the top, you just want to fold it back, and now you have another edge that is here, and you just want to finger press that down so you have an edge on it. And then we're going to take it back to the machine, and it's going to run 2 little lines here to hold this in place. And there we have it. I did those 2 little ones here. Let's see if we can see them. We've got this one here, and we have this one here. So we just did those 2. And the next thing that we have to do, which is the last step for this outside portion of the bag, is we need to take the material and we flip it back up again. Remember, this is all on the front of the hoop, and this is why you need a piece of material long enough. You need to make sure it will match at the top. And so then you fold it up, and you have this portion at the bottom, which will only go to there. So you want to just push it down, finger press it. And what you want to make sure for this is that your bag bottom, so you can see there's a couple of folded pieces here, and then you can see the bottom placement stitching. So this needs to line up with the first one so that your bag is going to have a nice bottom. So just make sure the folds at the bottom are nice, matching up. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take it back to the machine, and it's going to do another stitch to hold the box bottom, and it's also going to run the 2 side seam stitches. So I do recommend doing this in the same color material as the bag so that the seam stitching is less noticeable. All right, let's go do that. And there we have it. The outside of the bag is done. You can see that this part is open. And we have our little bottom flat pieces here. Oh, make sure you cut off the little string bits. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is take it out of the hoop, and we need to take it off the stabilizer. So the easiest way I find is what we have to do is we have to cut off the excess material at the top at where these lines would be. So you can either do it on this side if you can see the lines, or you can flip it over to the other side where you have the placement line. So I am going to use that. And what I use is just a basic rotary cutter. So I just line it up to my stitched line. All right, so you can see it's the same spot as the front. All right, so now take off the stabilizer. So I have taken the stabilizer off of that. All right. And the next thing is I like to cut the side seams and leave about a half of an inch is what I do. Okay, so we need to iron these side seams up, and I actually find the easiest way to do it, because you can see there's a bunch of little folded pieces here. So what I do is just at the top of the folded piece, I cut just above it. Just make a little slit. Don't cut the side stitching, so that when I'm ironing it, I will have a piece that irons down flat. So do that on both sides. All right, so this piece here is what your finished outside should look like. Now, if you notice I was ironing on one side then the other, well, the circle was in the front. It's because you want to make sure not to iron on the vinyl, because this will happen to your iron. So don't do that. Now I need a new iron. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to be doing the lining piece. Now the lining piece is exactly the same as this piece except for one thing. The lining piece will have extra material at the top for the drawstring casing. So when you're putting the material onto the hoop, the placement line at the top, you have to go above that placement line about 2.5 inches to make sure that you have enough material to fold for the drawdown casing. So I'm not going to show the same process over again. However, I will likely just throw in that portion and then come back when my lining has been completed. Okay, so I just came back to show you for the lining piece. What I have done, what I will do is here again I have the rectangle done with that, and so I'm turning it to the back of the hoop, and up here at the top of the hoop where the placement line is, you take your material, and what I have done across mine is I marked a little black line there. So this is 2.5 inches down, and what I do is I just take this so that I know where that is, and I line that up to the top of the placement stitch just so that I know that I have enough material going at the top for the drawstring casing, and that is the only difference. So I'm going to be taking it back to the machine and doing the rest of the steps. And there we have the lining that is done. So this would have been what was on the front of the hoop, obviously, and this was on the back of the hoop. So you can see it's exactly the same process. And at the top here, I do have that extra material. So you can either use the front ones to cut if you like, but the back one is a little bit easier with. And so for the lining, you need to make sure that you leave it at the top. So the side seams are not stitched, and that is what is supposed to happen. It is correct. And so what we need to do is use the placement stitch line that's at the top as a guide, and I like to do a 2 inch at the top, but you could do 1.5. I wouldn't go much less than that. Not sure if you'd be able to find something to fit nice. Anyway, so we're going to cut it off up top here. So here's the placement line, and then here's where we're cutting 2 inches above. All right, so we can see that. And the next thing is just to take it out of the stabilizer as usual. All right, so I went ahead and I took off the stabilizer and, oops, let me see here. I made that little slit near the bottom. I cut the edges to about 1/2 inch, and same thing as the first one. We need to fold over the sides. Now at the top, if you remember, it's not attached, right? So we do need to fold over the sides, level all the way along, all the way up to the top, okay, and iron those down flat. Okay, I have done the ironing part, and what I like to do is I like to add a steam seam in here, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Okay, so that is just kind of held up in place to make it a little bit easier for me. So the next thing that we have to do is what we need to do is take these top pieces that are kind of where the sides are open, that's where the drawstring casing will be. And we need to take the one piece and fold it down just until the stitching so it doesn't go any further. And give that a quick little iron across that. All right, so now, once we have that ironed fold in there, what we need to do is take this piece and fold it in half. So you fold the raw edge to that ironed fold, okay? And then you just fold it down again and iron that. All right, so that will create the casing right there. We have now a casing for the drawstring. So you just do the same thing on the other side. All right, so just let that cool for a second. And now something else that I like to do is to help keep the casing down. I actually add some of the steam-a-seam, but you don't have to do that. You can pin it, you can glue it, you can clip it, whatever you prefer. Okay, so the next thing that we have to do now that that is done, see, it's not stuck down yet, so that's right, it shouldn't be. What we need to do is we need to take the outside part of the bag. So I'm just going to let that cool off. And we need to turn this one right side out. So you can see the nice window there. And for the sides, you can kind of feel where your fingers go just to push those out nice. You can see the integrated boxed corners in there. Okay, so now that that is turned right side out, so look in the middle there, then we need to add this piece. So you need to make sure your two windows are facing the same way, and you want the wrong side facing out. So you just put your hand in, and I just usually make it a little bit smaller at the bottom to fit in easier. So you just take it and you put it inside, matching up the windows, and also keep your seams correct. And there you can see the window will line up if you've done it right. So again, you just want to push out the little corners. Okay. All right, so now you can see we have that flap up top, and what we need to do is make sure that your two side seams are matching up, okay? And this is where you can use pins or whatever else works for you. So match your two side seams up. And then you fold your little casing part over. Okay, so for your casing part, you can see what we've got there. It covers the raw edge of the top, and this is why I like the steam-a-seam, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure these match up, and you just make sure that these two parts of the casing at the bottom, you want them to line up nicely there to give a nice look around the bag. Okay, so they're on the seam, those two parts are open, and you're either going to pin it in place, you're going to clip it in place, or whatever. And once that is done, then we take it to the machine and we need to sew 2 stitches. So I sew 2 stitches. You could only sew one at the bottom if you prefer, but I like to do one around the top and one around the bottom to hold the casing in place. All right, so we will go ahead and do that. So I went and we did the stitching there for the casing, so you can see it's now held in place, creating the casing. And the next thing to do is just add the drawstring. So what I'm doing is I'm using just I don't know, a cord I just have in my stash, and I am just using one of these, and I put it in the casing. I don't put it in between the lining pieces. I actually put it next to the main bag piece, and you start with one side and then you go all the way around. All right, and you do that to come out the same side that you went in. Just get some extra here. And this that's for the one side of the drawstring, and now we need to do it on the other side. So you come to the side that you didn't use and you feed the drawstring all the way around that way. All right, so now you can just tie those two drawstrings off at whichever length you would like. It's best to make them equal, but there you have it. So you can see that most of it is done in the hoop except that one row of stitching, and I know you guys can do that. So you can see it draws very nicely. All right, so I really hope that you love this cute little bag. If you haven't yet, please give me a thumbs up, like the video. It helps move it up in the algorithms, and I want you to try it and have a wonderful day. Subscribe. Thank you.